we say our mission is to go do this thing. And we think that that's also how we're going to go do the thing. And we just kind of hold on to the mission like over and over and over. And we're like, we're going to do this thing. We're going to do this thing. But there isn't always a model behind it.
What are the secrets that drive the businesses you love or nonprofits you admire? Join us as we uncover the surprising ideas at the intersection of causes and brands. I'm Dave Raley.
And I'm Carly Berna. Each episode, learn from leaders of nonprofits and companies that will give you insights that you can put into action. This is the Purpose and Profit Podcast.
Season 6 of the Purpose and Profit Podcast is brought to you by Share. Hello, Carly.
Hi, Dave.
I love starting these episodes where it's just you and I on a real, kind of low note because it can only go up from here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, hey, so we are just coming to the end of season 6. It's wild to me just to think how time has flown. And we were talking about how some of our most popular episodes in previous seasons were ones where just you and I riffed on a topic. And so we have been remiss not to drop one of those episodes in season 6. So, dear listener, you get the pleasure of listening to Carly and Dave, just the two of us today. So this is going to be a fun one. We're going to talk a little bit about mission and model and how those two things are not the same.
Yeah, when we were going through topics of what we wanted to talk about, this one really stuck out to me because I worked at a nonprofit for 10 years. And I think in the nonprofit space, I see a lot, and probably honestly in the for-profit space too, we say our mission is to go do this thing. And we think that that's also how we're going to go do the thing. And we just kind of hold on to the mission like over and over and over. And we're like, we're going to do this thing. We're going to do this thing. But there isn't always a model behind it. Like, this is how we're going to get to that. Like, I can't remember the exact phrase, but like when Subway said they wanted to be like the number one place that serves sandwiches or whatever, like they didn't just hold on to that, right? Like they had like a franchise model, like they had like all these ways of how they were going to get there. So I think it's really important for any organization, both a nonprofit and a for-profit, to think about what is your mission and what is your model. But if you were like working or even just talking to one of our listeners about that, how would you actually define mission versus model?
I think it's a perfect place to start. I think about the mission of an organization as something that is typically timeless and doesn't change. It's not what we do, but it's what we accomplish, what we exist to accomplish. And so your mission, from my perspective, shouldn't change. And that's the piece where I think people get confused. Their model is how you accomplish your mission. I think Subway, I'm not a Subway aficionado, but I'll risk some conjecture here. I think Subway reminds me of Krispy Kreme donuts, speaking of other franchises that I'm much more familiar with. If we're talking about sweet objects, I'm far more in tune. But both Subway and Krispy Kreme, I think, have suffered from some of the same fate, which is their model was high volume, high sort of ubiquity. Like you could just find them everywhere. But then, ironically, the quality bar dropped. And so it's like, great, there's a Krispy Kreme now in every grocery store, but it's not very good.
Yeah.
I remember, by the way, I think this was high school, going into Subway and they're like pulled the lettuce out of the freezer. I was like, oh man. So that's a perfect example of an organization that, maybe its mission was to feed the world or to serve really great quality food, but sometimes their model either serves them super well, and maybe in the early days it does, but over time, our model, the whole point of this is that our model needs to change in order to accomplish our mission.
Yeah. I think, was it this season or last season, we had someone on who came from Blockbuster, or the original Blockbuster.
Yeah, I think that was season. I think I was just looking at. I think that was season 4. I think it was 2 seasons ago.
Wow. Okay, that feels like
Tom
yesterday.
Beck.
Yes.
Season 4, episode 5.
Yes.
If you're looking for it.
Okay.
Leadership lessons.
Go
from
back
Blockbuster.
to that. Yeah. I think this is a really great example of an organization where the model should have changed, but it didn't. Right. Like for those of us, hopefully everyone listening, maybe not, is old enough to know what a Blockbuster is. You go in, you pick out your movie, you bring it home. But then like Netflix came out, and actually even before Netflix, like do you remember Redbox? You'd go up and you'd get your DVD.
Walmart,
yes.
check out.
But like Blockbuster never changed their model. Like their mission probably didn't change. I don't exactly know what it is, but I'm guessing it's something like to entertain everyone or whatever. But like when you look at that example, what do you take from that like a leader should learn?
No, that's a perfect example, and there's a number of them, and we'll hit on some of them today. Apple, I've been forbade from using examples of Disney, so we're not going to talk about Disney. Anybody? But no, there's plenty of business examples as well as I think charity examples of organizations that confused their mission with their model. And the reason I think this is important. Yeah, and we'll come back to Blockbuster in a second. But I think this is important because, and the way I always say it, Carly, is the graveyards of history are filled with organizations that pioneered one way of doing things, but failed to transition to the next model. Mm-hmm. And often it is that new, shiny organization that has no trappings of what came before. And so they start in the new. But then inevitably, right, over time, as we look at the organizational maturity curve, those organizations tend to then become the organizations that don't transition to the next model. And so this is one reason why you and I talk a lot about innovation, why it's so important, is because in order to accomplish our mission, we need to create new S-curves, new models for accomplishing those things.
Yeah. And before you keep going, can you talk about the S-curve for those who don't exactly know what exactly you're talking about?
Yeah, so this is a thank you for calling that out. You know, it's the classic kind of business school thing that every organization goes through a life cycle, just like every human, every institution, every church starts at infancy, right? And then there's early growth, mid growth, but then ultimately so you start flat, you curve up really typically very quickly. In fact, Tom, it was so fun having that conversation with Tom. He opened the 3rd ever Blockbuster, and I think they were at like $3 billion valuation just within, I don't even remember how long, but it just rapid growth, right? But inevitably that S curve starts to slow down, right? You have slowing, plateauing, and then ultimately decline. And so I think a good company to look at would be Apple computers over the decades as they've introduced new products. So the personal computer would be an easy one to pick on. The personal computer has had its own S-curve. I don't know about you, Carly, but I no longer have a desktop computer in my home.
Same. I also don't have Apple, though, so, you know.
Okay, there you go. But I could not have imagined a world like 10 years ago if you would have told me, Dave, you're not going to have a desktop computer, whether it's a PC or Mac, at my home. I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, how am I going to do computer stuff, right? It's like, it's called your phone, Dave, or your iPad, or I do have a laptop. And so that's an example of an organization that didn't just say, we are the personal computer company, and they just stuck on that, because if they were the personal computer company only today, then they wouldn't be in business or they wouldn't be doing very well. But they were able to create new models, mobile phones, mobile music players, all that kind of stuff. And so that's an example of an organization that's created new S-curves. But yeah, every organization goes through it. It is a law. Like, it's just the way life is, that organizational decline will happen eventually. How
does an organization recognize they're there? Like, I'm honestly thinking about the nonprofit that I worked at. Like, were they at the top of their S-curve? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's super easy when an organization is small, because you can kind of just look at the results and be like, they're going up or they're not.
Or if they have a product that like you can kind of tell the market. But when it's like a mission, like a program mission, how do you tell? Yeah. Like, does it have to do with like saturation of?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to just conjecture a few things that come to mind as I've thought about this. One is that I think that the organizations that you have external results, so that one should not be ignored. Like, it's super easy to try not to think about those things. And I've worked with organizations that you can just look objectively at the results and just say things are declining or slowing. So that's one super easy button. But then the other thing, and I think about this, I think that there's the difference between like the organization and the product. And I'm just kind of going to workshop this with you a little bit. Sometimes an organization can have a really hot product, or an individual, like in the case of a charity, they might have a program that's super effective, but then the rest of the organization is ultimately in decline, right? And so I think there is a difference between what programs the organization has and then what their overall organization is in terms of its life cycle. I mean, what do you think?
Honestly, I'm trying to think about, like, when I think about from a nonprofit perspective, almost like the causes we talk about, because sometimes we take a mission and we talk about the same causes like over and over again. And stale is like the wrong word, but like maybe it's just not hitting in the same way. And at that point, it's like, okay, we can have the same mission, but the model has to change.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I'm
thinking about a ministry that we both know that's based out of Florida. Like, they can have a mission of serving a certain area, and maybe they normally serve it through food or like shelter or whatever, but like, hey, now they have to have a different model that tries to reach the area in a different way because of XYZ thing that's happened. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And in fact, two examples come to mind. One very, recent in the last 10 years, and then one several decades ago. So we'll start with the older example. World Vision is an organization that
ever heard of it?
Our listeners have heard of. One of my mentors, Steve Woodworth, the CEO at Masterworks, was actually at World Vision in the 1980s when they really were exploding with this thing called child sponsorship. But behind the scenes, one of the challenges that they faced was that the actual model, the program model in the field was really, as I understand it, really kind of difficult to operate and difficult to scale, because they were individually, like, if a donor sponsored a child A, well, child B in the village wouldn't get support and services, and that just didn't feel fair or right. And so what World Vision did, and Steve was a big part of helping redesign the model for the organization to what is known as an area development program model, which people that are in that world know that very well. But suffice to say, what it did was it combined all of the World Vision services, not just child welfare services, but also clean water and microfinance and community development programs, and said, we're going to actually fund an area because that is much more holistic, much more effective. By the way, Steve was involved with thinking about, okay, how do we translate that to child sponsorship? Long story short, they did it really well, and the organization, I think, grew by $100 million under his leadership. Right, yeah. So it's pretty incredible.
Do you have a second example? You said
the second example, much more recent. We actually just interviewed Brady Josephson from Charity Water just a couple of episodes ago, episode 6 in here in season 6, and we didn't talk about it in the episode, but Charity Water, less than 10 years ago, the primary funding model for Charity Water was one-time gift campaigns. It was give your birthday, do a fundraiser, peer-to-peer. But over the last 10 years, Charity Water, under the leadership of Scott Harrison and the team, have said, like, no, we need resilient, reliable, recurring giving. And so they've actually pivoted in this case, their support model to actually fuel the work that they're doing through recurring giving.
Recurring giving, Dave.
Yeah.
You have anything to say about that? Or I feel like that's a whole other episode. Actually, before we even get to, if we even get to recurring giving, I'm just thinking about, some of the things that prevent a for-profit or a nonprofit from realizing that their model has to change. I'm going to give you my ideas, and then you can respond and come up with yours. Yeah. Just from my own experience, and maybe you have this too because you worked at an organization for a long time. I think sometimes there's, especially if the founder is still there, like kind of like, I'm sure there's more intellectual ways to say this, but like the founder is still there. And so they've seen it from the beginning to now. And they feel like, well, if we could just go back and do the thing that was working 10 years ago, then we can make it work. Like, we need to go back and do that thing. They can't see, because they've built it. And so they're like, we just need to keep doing that thing that I was doing. And they can't see like that next step. I also think the other thing is sometimes in organizations, there's like what I'll call like a sacred cow. And it's like, well, we can't ever stop that program because of a million reasons, like it's so-and-so's pet program. It brings in the most donors. It brings in the most money, whatever, those types of things. So then you can't often innovate when there's all these boundaries and limitations and guidelines. So you can't move to that new model because you can't see outside of that box.
Yeah. No, I think both of those are very real tensions. I think with founders, it's so interesting to me because I've worked with a lot of founders. I've been a founder. And a lot of times one of the things that creates a founder, that the kind of, I don't want to say personality type, but the sort of working genius, to use a phrase that we've used a lot before. If you use a working genius model, a lot of founders actually are kind of invention geniuses. Like, they love creating new and novel ways of doing things. In fact, just as much a problem, I think, Carly, as a founder who doesn't see the next model is a founder who constantly changes things just for the heck of it.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
Yeah. I'm not one of those, I swear.
No.
No, but I don't think there's like one sort of necessarily specific challenge, but I do think the important thing is for leadership, whether you're a founder, a second gen, third gen, or whatever, nth gen, is to think, are we confusing the way in which we do accomplish our mission with our mission? And I'll make this personal. I mean, my mission is, my broad mission in life is to inspire generosity. Now, what that means for me... Can you say that
one more time? The part where you said, are we confusing our mission with... So can you say that again?
With the way we do things.
Are we confusing our mission with the way we do things?
Right.
Okay.
We're mixing those two things up. Are we assuming that, well, because we... I'll use an example from the faith sector. There's been a huge generation of churches that have grown through these kind of multi-site sort of church models, right? Well, I'm not an expert in those, but I do know that has been one of the models that in the 2025 era has been challenged. So I think about my own goals and my own mission. My mission and the mission at Imago is to inspire generosity. Well, how we do that, that's a pretty wide field. Currently, the way we do that is through deep dive assessments. We look at 10 areas of your recurring giving program, and we create a 2-year roadmap. We also do workshops. We also do training and speaking and those sorts of things. And for now, that is very innovative and very effective. But as a founder, one of the challenges I'm going to face, and I already face today, is really discerning what is going to be the most effective method to accomplish the mission, in this case, of inspiring generosity.
That makes sense. When organizations are thinking about these different models, how do you suggest they go about doing that? Because especially ones who've been around a long time, whether, again, it's a business or a nonprofit, they're like, hey, it seems really risky to change our model right now. Like, how do you go about deciding, hey, yeah, we should change our model? Like, do you just change everything? Like, do you change it a small amount? Like, how do you, that feels overwhelming.
Yeah. I think it depends on the stage of development of the organization. In the early stage, you can change much more quickly, candidly, because it's like the risk becomes much more minimal. Obviously, at later stages, and I've worked in both types of organizations. And in my experience, I think it's about really a couple things. Number one, I would say, is to have a lot of irons in the fire. Not too many. I mean, you can have... I've worked with organizations where there's too many things going on and nobody can figure out what the heck's happening. But more often than not, organizations don't have multiple things that they're working on at once. And the reality of innovation is some decent percentage of the things you're working on are not going to work or they're not going to scale.
Yeah.
And so having an attitude where it's like, how can we make sure there are multiple things going on at one time, I think is really critical.
I think it's important what you just said, that every model isn't going to work. So just because you shift to a new model doesn't mean it's going to work right away. Like, you might have to fail at a few new models, but that shouldn't stop you from trying.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that's critical. I think in encouraging and really incentivizing people to be willing to try these new models. I think there is something to be said as well about it's really hard to innovate a new model within an existing old model, and this is always a tension. And I've been on both sides of this tension, where it's like, have you heard the phrase skunk works or incubator, where it's like we're gonna do a new thing, but it's gonna be separate from the main thing.
Yeah.
And on the whole, I tend towards that direction, because it is, when you have the like machinery of the existing way you do things up and running at scale, both of the programs and the processes and the people, it is hard to say like, but also over here, could you do this differently, this way? And so I'm a big fan of, small, kind of tight teams that have the ability to actually create those innovations.
Have you, in any of your consulting or working with businesses, actually walked an organization through a total model shift?
Yeah. So there's one of the organizations I worked with was, they brought me in to say, like, how do we bring new initiatives to market? And whether that's in, the case of a recurring giving program, or it's just the way we create new opportunities and new initiatives. And so what we basically did was brought them into it's basically a 4-step model, and I'll give you the 4 real quick. Basically, identify, prototype, launch, and scale. All of those phrases, if you've read anything Lean Startup or other types of innovation books, The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen, you'll see some of these frameworks. But it's like, identify, like, what is there something broken? Is there something what are we trying to actually accomplish here? Like, what's the problem or opportunity we're trying to seek? And then within that identify stage, we're trying to then like ideate and create new ways we might approach this. Mm-hmm. But then you've got a prototype. And I'm a big fan of saying, like, don't prototype everything, because you're going to spread yourself too thin, but identify a few strategic things that we're going to say, we're actually going to invest in building this thing out. It may or may not work. It's a prototype. That's why we call it that. But we're going to actually then put that into the market, so to speak. We're going to put that into the program, or we're going to put that into our fundraising initiative, and we're going to validate, like, what's the initial response? Do we need to go back to the drawing board? Do we need to make some revisions? And then after prototype is when launch comes in, which is like, okay, let's go. We think we have this pretty well defined. Let's see if we can create this at scale. And get it off the ground, essentially. And then scale is where a lot of organizations live, because they're in the maturity stage, which is like, oh, we have this process, and then we do this thing, we do that thing, and we have this process, and that's great. The problem is when that starts to slow down, or when you can see the writing on the wall, that's when you have to go all the way back to that ideate stage.
This episode is brought to you by Imago Consulting and co-host and founder Dave Raley's new book, The Rise of Sustainable Giving. You can learn more and pick up a copy at sustainablegiving.org. Again, that's sustainablegiving.org.
Virtuous helps nonprofits grow generosity through personal donor engagement and streamlined workflows. With CRM, fundraising, and marketing tools, Virtuous helps build trust and impact. Visit virtuous.org to learn more.
For those leaders that are listening, what is one thing that you would say that would make them think it's time to change your model?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think...
Because the reason I'm asking is because it's not always revenue. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like once it's revenue, you probably passed the time that you should have changed your model.
Right. That's kind of reminds me of the stock market. Like the stock market is always a lagging indicator of what's actually happening in business. And it's like, well, it's a little too late if you're just now responding. I don't know that there's one thing. If it were me, just thinking of the organizations I've worked in or worked with, I think you can, if you're honest, I think you can see the writing on the wall. It's just that's the hard thing is not being honest, but it's like there's this element of like, things aren't great. They used to be much better, but there's there's reasons. It's like reasons. And it's like when people start blaming external realities in the market and if this hadn't happened or whatever. And I'm not empathetic to those realities, but I do think it's like, it's much easier to point to external realities than like, oh, maybe the way in which we are doing these things is actually the thing that needs to be updated.
Yeah. I think also taking like a consultant mindset about your own business. Because I feel like, Dave, you and I love to talk about business problems, right? Like it's so easy to look back at Blockbuster and be like, well, why didn't they do this? Like they should have known. Or Barnes & Noble with Amazon or whatever. But I think sometimes when you're in your own organization, like you can't step outside of it. And it's almost like you have to look at your organization from like if you were a consultant coming in and being like, hey, what would I do here? What would that look like to kind of start over and like try to explore new things instead of giving all the reasons like you just said?
Yeah.
For those leaders that are feeling like you said, hey, maybe it's time to change our model. Like what is one piece of advice you'd give them that they could do?
I would ask myself the question, what if I'm discerning that my model may need to shift, I would ask them a couple questions. I would say, number one, what is your core like DNA? Like, what is it that you bring to market? And I'm trying really hard not to give a Disney example here, so I'm going to give an Apple example.
Okay, fine.
You were going to let me do Disney? No. No, well, Disney animation is the answer to the Disney one. They realized animation was the heart of their business, and that's what they had to fix first. But Apple, we'll use Apple as an example. I think the question is, what is your organization fundamentally, like in its DNA, good at? And Apple, I don't remember the exact words from Steve Jobs, but it's something to the effect of really beautiful, simple, integrated technology products, right? And so if you stopped there, then an iPod totally makes sense, an iPhone totally makes sense, an Apple Watch totally makes sense. If Apple had instead said we're a personal computer company and we make the best personal computers in the world, and then obviously they would be confusing their mission for their model, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing I would look at. And then I would ask myself, what am I then doing about it? And it doesn't mean like I need to throw my model out, but what are the irons that I'm putting in the fire that I'm experimenting with? At any given time, for example, with Imago, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we have 3, 4, or 5 different things that we're experimenting with, that we're scaling, that we're doing. It doesn't mean they're not even they can't be successful. They can be very successful. They just may not be the main thing that we're scaling. And so it's like, what are we doing to continue to experiment and grow?
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I really think this is such an important topic, especially in today's world. I think when you talked about reasons, I could immediately think of places I've worked or situations I'm in where we were like, oh, well, the market this and donors this and the economy this and politics this. And it's like, and of course, some of those are 100% legit, like COVID, like not a thing anyone could control. And no one needed to change their model because of it. Like models were changed, but not like we shouldn't have been able to forecast that was going to happen.
Right.
So I think it's super important for those who are listening, even just to like do like a quick check of your organization. Like, hey, is there anything here where I'm giving those types of reasons, or I hear myself saying those things? And maybe I do need to reconsider. Even if you consider and say, hey, no, we're good. We're still like going the right direction or whatever. But just to kind of take an inventory.
Yeah. Well, can I add a bonus?
You can.
And COVID made me think of it, is the cliche way of saying it is don't waste a good crisis.
Yeah.
The way I like to say it is, people talk about how necessity is the mother of invention. Well, if necessity is the mother of invention, Carly, then crisis is the mother of innovation. And I don't know about you, but any innovation that I've experienced and I think about and the stories that I tell of like, oh, I was on this team and we did this new thing or we created this new thing or whatever, it almost, not always, but almost always was in the face of a crisis. Like something wasn't working, something was broken, something was foisted upon us from outside that we didn't know was going to happen. And it's those things that honestly, they're the most painful experiences, but often they're the ones we point back to and we're the most proud of. Mm-hmm. And so when you're in that crisis moment, and I'll tell you, I'm working with clients right now that are in some version of a crisis moment. That's, I don't wish that upon anybody, but let's take advantage of it. Like those are the times where we can do incredible things that we never thought the organization would be able to do before. And can really bring light in that next phase of growth for the organization.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we could do a whole other podcast about COVID, and we probably did during the actual time. But so many things change so rapidly in ways that we never could have made happen if we weren't having to innovate that quickly. I mean, just think about, contactless payments, like rapidly became a thing that everyone had to adapt, Even like the small mom and pop that's like has never barely took a credit card. So much had to change so quickly. So I think that's a great example of like, don't look at a crisis as like a terrible thing, but how can we improve from this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, since this was your kind of article, anything I missed that you want to just touch on? And I'll also just note that we'll put the link to this in the show notes. So if you want to read kind of all the examples, including the Disney examples that we didn't cover today, you can read that.
I'm just so proud of my restraint today.
Yeah, me too.
That's the main thing I want our listeners to take away. No, the article's called Your Model is Not Your Mission. And it's been a conversation that you and I have had off and on in various forums over the years. And I think it's one that we can't hit on candidly enough because it's a universal topic. Like this is not like there's something about human nature and organizational nature, which I think comes out of human natures because it turns out organizations are humans too, that cause us to fall into these traps of being like, forgetting that what am I trying to accomplish in the world is different than the way in which I accomplish that. Mm-hmm. And I would just today, as you've been listening, some of you have like it's hit you in the gut. You're like, "Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about because I have better sense of what I'm trying to accomplish." And the reality is the way in which we're trying to accomplish it is not effective. Period, or it's not as effective as it used to be, and it's tailing off. And so that's the first step, which is to recognize that is a reality. And then the question is, what do we do about it?
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, good. Well, Carly, another season in the books. This has been super fun. We have an announcement to make for the next season. Should we tell them? Should we tell our listeners that made it to this?
We should, except we haven't even executed this, so it's kind of risky.
No, this is why this is gonna be great. We are moving the podcast to a video.
Let's not say moving. We're adding.
We're not moving the podcast. The podcast will be in your feed as you listen to it right now. But we have been talking about this for a couple seasons now. Turns out people apparently appreciate video feeds on podcasts. And so I don't know about you, Carly, but I'm, as my 12-year-old daughter likes to say, I'm nervous and excited. So I'm nervited.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it should be fun.
So stay tuned. Season 7. If you want to tune in and see us with our guests, on camera, on the YouTubes, you can do that. It's going to be awesome.
We want to thank all of our sponsors for supporting Season 6 of the Purpose and Profit podcast, including Virtuous, Faith Search Partners, Dickerson Baker, Share, Synergy, Avid, and Imago Consulting. For more episodes of the Purpose and Profit podcast, visit purposeandprofitpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love it if you would rate the show and write us a review. Follow the show on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. You can also sign up for our email newsletter to get the latest updates. Thanks for listening.